All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today and welcome to another episode of Building the Empire, hosted by the Commercial Real Estate Group at Georgia State. My name is Jennifer Cruz and I will be your host today. And I'm also serving as the president of CRAG for the spring semester of 2023. And I'm also actually the first female president in the history of this organization. And for today, it's a very special episode because in honor of Women's History Month, we wanted to bring in someone who is a true trailblazer and pioneer for women in the commercial real estate industry. I am so excited to be here with Ray Uttenhove. Ray, welcome to the episode.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and congratulations. I am so proud of you, the first woman to lead CRAG. It's important that we keep blazing trails.
Love it. Yes. Thank you so much, Ray. So before we get started, I'll go ahead and give a brief introduction to Ray. So Ray Uttenhove joined SRS Real Estate Partners in June of 2005 after a career with CBRE. She led SRS's Atlanta office and has been a member of SRS's board of members for 16 years. During her leadership tenure, she doubled revenues in the Atlanta office and built a diverse team of high producers. In addition, she was a founding chair of SRS's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and SOAR, a community of SRS's female producers empowering each other to further advance their careers. Ray's work today continues as an industry-leading retail tenant representation expert and as a community relations leader for SRS in the Atlanta area. Ray has a significant record of achievement in providing comprehensive real estate and consulting services to retailers and owners of retail real estate. She has directed strategic multi-market expansion planning and implementation for her clients, producing high volume and profitable stores for her clients. Ray is a member of the ICSC, International Council of Shopping Centers, and the International Women's Forum. She is an immediate past chair of the Women's Philanthropy Network at Georgia State University and serves on the Atlanta Symphony Board of Counselors in the Spark Giving Circle at the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta. She is a past chair of the Atlanta Women's Foundation, former president of Crew Atlanta, and is a past trustee of the Georgia State Foundation Board. Ray is also very well known in the industry by winning several awards, such as the Consistent Top Retail Producer, Top 20 Woman in Atlanta Diva Award, the Who's Who in Commercial Real Estate by the Atlanta Business Chronicle, the Atlanta Power Woman Award by BizNow, Top Leader in the Atlanta 500 by Atlanta Magazine, and the Distinguished Alumni Award from Georgia State University in 2022. Ray, is there anything else that I'm missing there?
Oh my gosh, no, what a nice introduction. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So Ray, let's start from the very beginning. Where did you grow up and how that kind of influenced who you became?
So I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. My father was a doctor. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, but very active in the community. And, in the 60s and 70s, I had a very traditional conservative upbringing. But there were a couple of things that really influenced me, and they were the women in my life. My grandmother, and I am her namesake, ran a sand company. It was, her husband had passed away. It was the business, and she ran this very successful company. So she was a role model for me. And my mother, while I said she had played a very traditional role, she was always very involved in the community. And in her late 50s, ran for political office and chaired the county council in Columbia, South Carolina for 7 or 8 years. So I had some really strong women in my background. But I was very influenced in terms of how I started my career, because the messages that I got as a young woman, as a young girl, was that, get married, have a family. I was encouraged to, maybe you should be a teacher because that fits in well if you've got children and flexible schedules. And so that was all the messaging that I got as I was growing up. So I had to, change that narrative because it didn't match what my aspirations were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like especially sometimes we need that representation. So if we don't see women in a specific industry, we don't even think hey, maybe that's something I can do or pursue. So, thank you so much for sharing that. But, you actually do have a bachelor's and master's degree in history. What kind of attracted you to the commercial real estate industry?
So again, I have a wonderful liberal arts education, and I really believe in a broad education. And I taught school for a number of years. I got a degree as a school psychologist and an MA in history. And frankly, that was my wandering around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Today, thank goodness, um, you know, the and Georgia State does a wonderful job with this. We're set up so that no matter what you're studying, there's really an opportunity to do internships and really explore a lot of career life options. And so for me, I didn't have that. I had to do that experience through a series of jobs. I was always fascinated about with the real estate business. I don't know why. I didn't have any real experience. It was just one of those things that I wanted to do. And because I loved building things, I loved retail. And and it wasn't easy in the 80s to get into the real estate business without sales background, without business background. Everybody sort of discounted teaching as having any, real being meaningful experience. But actually it was. So I just I searched and was determined and finally found a place that gave me an opportunity and a chance to start in brokerage in the early 80s. So it was a very non-traditional, not a great example of a how
Mhm.
you pursue a career and prepare yourself for one, but it worked out.
No, yeah, definitely. And I actually noticed among a lot of different, I love asking that question because a lot of people have very different answer to that. But a common theme I do see is that, I just kind of fell into it or I was exposed to it and decided to pursue it, which is kind of what happened to me. I didn't even know about the commercial real estate industry until my sophomore year when T. Dallas Smith came and talked about, yeah, like I work in commercial real estate. And I'm like, oh, what is that? Like, I want to learn more about that. So, you mentioned you started your career in brokerage. What was it like starting your career as a broker as a woman?
Well, when I started in the business in actually 1981, there were so few women. In fact, I went to work for a big company. I'd actually started with a really small company, but I wanted to go to work for a large institutional company, and I went to work for what is now CBRE. They put me in retail. I had the benefit of working with a really good, you know, partner, senior leader in that office. And but I was the only woman. In fact, they laughed and said I took the revolving female cube. So because we were all in workstations at that point. Now we're back to workstations again, but there just weren't many of us. And so I did have the experience of it, realizing it can be very lonely to be the only one in the room. I was almost always the only one in the room. But I had the benefit of finding a group of other women who were also lonely and the only only women in their companies. And we formed a bond and had a little informal group that eventually developed into CREW, which is Commercial Real Estate Women, but we supported each other. And so I learned early in my career that having the right kind of support network is important.
Yes, I love that. I think that even with, our student organization, the commercial real estate group, I think community is very important because our group is it's extremely diverse this semester. It has a lot of women, a lot of people from underrepresented communities. So sometimes overcoming these obstacles, we have to kind of come together and, form a community in order to empower each other. So,
Yes.
yeah. So throughout your background, you've been involved in a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And you mentioned that, you were inspired by, being the only woman in the room. How did you actually, go about creating these groups and, making sure that they are serving, purpose for everyone in the group?
Yeah. So, so early on, in my career, I had an informal network, and then both within CV and when I eventually came to SRS, we set up a women's resource, network. And so we created opportunities for women to connect within the company. The thing that's very clear today, and this has been a long time coming, is that the real estate industry is so heavily dominated by white men. It's just that's been traditional of the industry, and it has been very, very slow to change. And so I would say that my focus was primarily on women. But as as I've grown and learned and benefited from all of the wonderful opportunities that come out of having a diverse group of friends, I've realized that it just doesn't make sense if we're going to really, as an industry and as a community and as a country, if we're going to be everything we can be, then we need to benefit from the wonderful, rich, diverse backgrounds that exist. And I think that is particularly true for the real estate industry, for the commercial real estate industry. So it's sort of that fundamental belief that moved me from a focus on opportunities for women to really concentrate on how do we create a racially, ethnic, and much richer, richly diverse community, and how do we, how do we set an example? That's been a focus for us as a company at SRS. And thankfully, it is a big focus for many real estate companies and for much of the industry now. Finally.
No, yeah, definitely. And we can even see like with our executive board this semester, it's extremely diverse. It's a lot more
Yes.
women, a lot of people from different backgrounds. So, when we're at the table, creating these different events, I love to hear all the different opinions and thoughts of everyone. And it's definitely, been a big attribute to the success we've had this semester and hopefully for, years and semesters to come as the organization is growing. But, creating something like that isn't easy because you have to make sure that the community and environment is like inclusive. I'm kind of curious to know what successful initiatives or best practices has your organization identified concerning diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. So in 2000 and I guess it was 18 or 19, at SRS, we began to look at the whole bigger diversity question beyond just hiring women. And we had a serious assessment of where we were, which was both embarrassing and distressing. And so we set up a diversity council and a group of people with the commitment of our CEO and our board to really making change. And the focus started with beginning to talk about, first of all, racism, because this was just when all the anti-racism was beginning to surface among, it was pre Floyd, but still a lot of, a lot of understanding that particularly as white people that we really needed to understand unconscious bias. So we did some of that training internally. And then we made some commitments to hiring, not just hiring our friends and our, the son and daughter of, somebody we play golf with or, whatever, but to really go outside of communities. And then we also looked at things like our vendors and, our philanthropy. We, for example, adopted the Boys and Girls Club as as a as a partner for some of our community work, realizing that we needed to give back in a different way. So that is our DE&I program at SRS that really is evolving, and we are learning in the process. But I think the one thing we know is that, um, you know, as a country, as a country, most of us live in very homogeneous kind of communities. We tend to still be a fairly segregated world. And so there has to be a real effort to seek out and develop relationships, you know, outside of what tends to be safe and comfortable. That's what I love about Georgia State, and has been, you know, such a wonderful and rich experience for me being involved in Georgia State. And that's true with Women Lead. It's true with your real estate, which if you're familiar with that program, it's familiar. It's true, obviously, of the real estate work that's being done. So I love that. I commend you for it. And every time I get to know all of you incredible young people, I am just energized and have take away from it great new ideas.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I actually love how you mentioned Woman Lead. That's one of my favorite courses I took during my time at Georgia State. I took that my junior year when I actually came back from my first corporate internship, where I was, you know, the only woman many times. I was the only person of color many times. But, you know, I think that Woman Lead was able to provide me with an amazing support of women that still support me to this day. And there's also some men in the classrooms, you know, because I think
Yes.
it's important for them to be allies. But yeah, so Woman Lead is an amazing course that, you know, everyone should look into if they're, you know, in the Robinson College of Business. And I think they even have like different sections. They have
There
Women Lead.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's now there are about 5 or 6 different sections. They
yes.
just added a College of the Arts and, you know,
Mhm.
as arts and sciences. Yes. So it is really a rich and wonderful course. I just wish I'd had that, you know, um, as part of my early experience. That it would have shortcut a lot of mistakes and wandering that I did.
Mhm. No, yeah. And I think it's incredible to have you as someone that we look up to and Women Lead as well. So thank you so much for, you know, everything you've done for that program. But, you know, I'll kind of touch on some points that you mentioned. So I think the first, you know, very important part is to recognize that diversity is important, and understanding throughout your organization, you know, where are, you know, the steps that you need to take in order to create a diverse team, in order for it to be an inclusive environment. And I think everything that you mentioned is incredibly important. Because, you know, that's something I've noticed as well, is sometimes people, you know, because they're so comfortable with the way their organization is and has ran for so many years, they don't think like, oh, like maybe let's, you know, think outside the box and hire someone that doesn't look like me. Let me hire someone that is not, you know, my
Yes.
direct family member. So I think, you know, overall, there's like even statistics that show that a diverse team actually leads to a more successful business and increases revenue by, you know, a high percentage. So no,
You
that's
know, the data is absolutely there. And I think one of the things, it's hard to shift cultures and organizations. And one of the commitments that we made was that this was not a, um, you know, this wasn't a marketing tool. You know, it wasn't a marketing approach, that it was that we had to make a very long-term commitment, because these kind of changes require that, you know, require that we're very diligent and that we've got the long view, because it takes time. It's hard.
yes, absolutely. So kind of on that note, you know, you've been a leader in various organizations that you're involved in. You know, I'm kind of curious to know, what is your leadership strategy and how have you effectively driven your team to accomplish the organization's goals?
Um, you know, I am, I would say that my focus is always on um, in a non-hierarchical approach to leadership. One of the things when I transitioned and came over to SRS, we were then the Staubach Company, and this was in 2005. One of the things that motivated me to come and build a team and build the office, because when I came over, the Atlanta office, which had been in existence for quite a while, had lost a lot of people, and it was really not going in the right direction. And so I really said, we're going to develop an office and a brokerage team that supports each other. And so I really, it really started out where instead of having a bunch of different teams that all competed against each other, that we really developed specific, teams that were dedicated to areas of expertise, and we supported each other. So we created an environment that was collaborative and where we could work together. And that is often, as I said, not the case in the brokerage business. So I truly believe that culture and collaboration is extremely important. And it's what drives my leadership management, is listening to my people, listening and, figuring out how can we really set goals for ourselves and accomplish them together. Because I think, I just think that's the key. I've never worked well in a top-down kind of environment. And I think you get the most out of any organization when everybody has an opportunity to contribute.
Absolutely. And I feel like it definitely all starts from the top and trickles down to everyone else. So if there's a strong leader who's, showing these, different collaborative culture, I think that really goes into the work as well. And everyone is able to, then execute at a very high level. So I think that's very important. But I'll kind of shift over to a little bit more of a CRE topic, but your focus with SRS has been on the retail asset class. How do you see retail evolving in Atlanta over the next couple of decades?
Well, I think retail, God, I love retail. The thing that is so interesting about retail is that it is ever changing. And successful retailers, successful developments are in tune with the needs of the consumer, the customer, the community. And, when I started in the business, we used to build these big old power centers with huge parking lots out front. Shopping was this, destination. You kind of drove your car, you drove up in front of one store, got out and shopped, got in your car and, went on to the next. And thankfully, that has changed. And I think it will continue to evolve. I think that retail has to be an extension of the community. It's cannot just be a destination. And, we now see that with the fascinating in-town retail development that is, we're also, has set an example, and it's happening out in the suburbs as well, where retail is a place for people to come together, and, shop, unique opportunities, green space, again, just a gathering, a place of interest. Because if that happens, then it is the right kind of environment for great retail. The one thing that I am very hopeful is that we're going to see a much more, I was going to say, over the next 10 years, that we're going to see Atlanta look different. Again, it's back to what I've talked about, that we tend to be a very segregated community. Now, you come into Midtown and in town, it's rich, it's exciting, it's diverse. And I think that it is important that that the retail reflect that, and that and hopefully that will continue. Because again, I think when you talk about retail has to look like and feel like and be reflective of what the community wants. It used to be developers went out and built things and crammed it down the throat of the community. Today, they go out and listen. And so I think it is really important that the development that happens involves everybody in the process. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. And I think that's really interesting. I actually have never heard of the retail asset class being an extension of the community, but I think that's very true across all asset classes, and making sure that, the people living in the area can actually, adapt to what's being brought into their neighborhood. So kind of on that note, I know a lot of students in our organization, they want to stay away from retail just because, COVID, they think, e-commerce, they think that the retail asset class is just not going to be as popular compared to everything else. So that's very interesting. That
Yes, and and again, when I say retail is adaptive, e-commerce has dramatically changed retail for the better. And no matter how much we're tied to our phones, Amazon, shopping online, all of that, the experience of brick and mortar gets stronger and stronger. It's different. It may serve a slightly different purpose, but there is a need for a shopping environment. And again, I would profess that a lot of that is because of that experience of people coming together and a gathering spot.
definitely, I love that. Well, Ray, as most of our listeners, most who are college students and young professionals early in their careers walk away from this episode, what are 3 pieces of advice you would give to them?
Oh, me. So first of all, this is a relationship business. Life is about relationship. So I think it's really important that we carefully but aggressively develop the right kind of relationships, and remember that. I'm not sure I recommend the book because it's kind of a little old and dated, but early in my career, I read a book called Never Eat Alone by a guy by the name of Farazi. And his whole thing was, don't waste time eating lunch alone. Use that to develop those relationships. So I think that the more time that that we can each expand our you know expand our networks, meet new people, that is really important. And these relationships, people that will support us through the process, and we in turn will support, can support them, those are just critical. It goes both ways. We each need that personal uh, support. And the way you get it is that you give back, you give to someone else. So I think that's really important. This other thing is, I think that I always say to people, don't get too comfortable. If you must push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And you hear that said, in some ways it sounds sort of trite, but I can always catch myself. I know when I'm not taking on enough is when I can sit at my desk and feel really comfortable. There is an advantage to being a little on edge. So I always push myself, particularly when I get involved in organizations or new things, to be sure that I'm taking on a little more than I think I can do. Um, and and I and so push yourself. The other thing is I have derived so much benefit from working in the community in various organizations. It is an obligation, I think, that we all have of giving back. But in the process of giving back, the most important leadership skills that I have often learned have been working in, you know, volunteer um, roles, leading nonprofits. So I would say get involved in business organizations, outside of jobs and school, but also get involved in something that you're really passionate about that can change Atlanta, that can help change our society and make it a better place.
I love that. No, I think all of that is truly incredible advice. And I think those are all things that I constantly remind myself and those around me, and even with our organization. Like, I know in my room, I have like a big sign that says growth and comfort cannot exist. And that was actually gifted to
I
me.
love it.
Yeah. It was gifted to me by my best friend in high school when we graduated. So it, definitely pushed me all throughout my college career. I have it like right by my door. So I see it right before I leave my room. So, it's always just a constant reminder, just, to always be a little bit on edge. And I think just, as women, sometimes we feel like we have to do kind of a little bit more. So,
Yes.
I think we should really embrace that. But I kind of want to dig in a little bit to something you mentioned. So commercial real estate definitely is a relationship business. And everyone, I think, has like their own like networking strategy or the way they go about building a supportive network. Do you have like any techniques that you've learned throughout your career to build, your supportive network?
So I would say that in building a supportive network, it can really be helpful um, to be involved in something that relates to your area of specialty, whether it's an asset class or whether it's an organization. For me, crew was really important. It was a great way to meet people that are, meet other women. Same thing with the International Council of Shopping Centers. That may be true with NAIOP. That may be true with, other things. I also think that the support network you build, that I look at it as how do I develop new friends, because it goes beyond a business relationship, just business relationships. The really important bonds that you create go deep. So I think thinking about it that way. I also think as you're involved in an organization and as you in a new job, that you need to be really thoughtful about developing um, and getting to know people that are in leadership roles in that company. And you want to stand out and be noticed. And the best way to do that is really to think about how can I help support that person or make their, do something that will make their job easier or whatever. Because having mentorships and sponsors and allies is critical to a career.
Definitely. And I think that was very important for a lot of our listeners to hear, as most of them, as I said, are college students, young professionals looking to expand their network. So thank you so much for sharing that. But Ray, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. We really appreciate it. We covered a lot of different topics. And I know it was a very valuable conversation for everyone who tuned in. So thank you everyone for tuning into today's episode. And thank you so much, Ray, again.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to have talked with you today, Jennifer.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Okay. Now let me stop.
That was awesome.